Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another exciting AdvisorShares AlphaNooner. Today, we are very lucky and excited to be joined by Margaret Brodie, CEO of Rubicon Organics, fresh off some great earnings. We're going to spend some time today talking through those earnings in a little more depth and color, as well as kind of getting a sense of what the rest of the year is for Rubicon and beyond. If you're out there and joining, one, appreciate it. It's great to tune in and kind of get more information on the world of cannabis globally, especially getting a deeper sense in Canada and abroad. But if you're out there and joining, it's a good reminder. Margaret's a great expert and has some great insight. So if you have questions out there, feel free to put them in the comments. If you've got comments, you just want to say hi, that's also great. But it's a good opportunity. So I would encourage you to do that as we go along, because there's a lot to unpack here. So with all that said, Margaret, thanks for joining. Really appreciate it. I know you are busy. You're holding it together. It seems like you're chugging along. You're just ripping and rolling, which is great.
Hey, we get to work in the cannabis industry. We need to remember that. Mac and I, as we were about to kick off, I said, we get to do this. We don't have to do this. And I think we have to remember that. It is so awesome to be creating a new industry, creating all these jobs and driving forward. It's not only hard work, very rewarding, but a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, I think that's the great, we were talking about earlier, great frame of mind for what has been complicated, something that requires a lot of problem solving and interesting kind of skills to get through. But if you love doing what you're doing, if you're very driven to do what you do, I think that shows up in the work and in the numbers. So, which is great. I know we'll dig into earnings. I know that's probably where people want to get a sense of, more color in terms of what you guys have posted. But before we jump in, just for anyone who is new joining, just kind of wants a refresher on Rubicon, can you kind of high level get us table set before we kind of jump into more of the details?
You want me to talk about our company? I'd love to. Look, Rubicon Organics is BC based, British Columbia, Canada. We are Canada's leader in premium weed, and we're very proudly BC weed. We have 3 flagship brands: Simply Bare Organic, which is really about the connoisseur and new news and drops and flavors and aromas. We have 1964 Supply Co., which is the engine of our business and really beautiful premium product. And we've got some fantastic genetics in there. And then we've got Wildflower, which is our wellness brand, which, the new consumer and the wellness consumer absolutely loves. We're listed on the TSXV. We have a fantastic team, fantastic board, and we've got 2 facilities. One is the home of Rubicon. It's called Pacifica. It's in Delta, British Columbia, right outside of Vancouver. And we bought earlier this year a second facility called Cascadia at the beginning of the Cascade Mountains. So Pacifica is right next to the Pacific Ocean. And it is 47,000 square feet indoor. Very excited because it was a premium facility that was operated before, and we're excited to be turning that on. And we're the passionate BC weed people looking to bring fantastic premium quality weed to Canada and around the world.
Yep. Fantastically said. And again, for anyone who's out there and wants some more information, obviously I point them to your website, to your social. I think that has some great insight, covers a lot of the earnings that we'll talk about shortly. And also, I definitely, seeing from Josh, need some more distribution, which is great to see. I think a lot of people do really connect with the products that you guys, and the message, I think, being really passionate, I think makes a big difference. And again,
and to speak cannabis speak, if we're talking to the connoisseur, the apples and bananas strain we've just launched in 1964, and we hit our highest ever terpenes with that, to the point where we had to go back and retest it because I thought, are we testing this differently? We hit over 5.8% terpenes on the plant, which is just incredible results. So we're all about high quality and doing it better all over again. Every time we do it, we want to be better and better and better. And when you look at the cannabis landscape, we talk a lot about, people talk about it as weed, right? I mean, it is a weed. Isn't it easy to grow? It's really easy to grow poorly. And it's not that easy to grow well. And to grow it well and to get better all the time is really what we want to do. So.
Yep, that's fantastic. I will say I can speak to that on an anecdotal level. In the office, we actually do have 1 or 2 cannabis plants that we've tried to grow a little bit. It is so hard. They are not doing well. So yeah, I think people who can do it well at scale and continue to improve and refine it, I think, that's great and fantastic to hear. All right, well then let's talk a little bit about how all that, translates into the numbers. You just had earnings very recently. Would love to kind of, get a bit of a sense of the numbers there, the highlights, and what people should know when they're kind of looking through your numbers.
Yeah, well, great question. Look, we are up 25% year over year, and we have not yet received production from our new facility. So I think that goes to show the power of our brands and what we're doing. And we've got 16% growth in the quarter, year over year, which is great. All right, we had EBITDA of 1.7 million, but that includes investing in our business. Like, we have to invest ahead for the production that's going to come out as we turn on this new facility. So I'm really, really pleased with the result. We also just secured, and it was announced on Monday, 4 million in incremental debt, 3 million term debt, and 1 million of an operating line. So we'll have in total about 14 million of term debt in our business. This is all under 7%, so 6.75%-ish interest rate, which we're really, really proud of, institutionally investable capital. And the business is on great footing. So we're thrilled. We've continued to hold our number one premium mantle. We're growing the business. We've got really clear growth catalysts coming with our new facility coming online. And we've just not only launched our first entry into the all-in-one vape. This year, we should have four SKUs in market by the end of the year. We've only had one in the third quarter. But in addition to that, we just announced our new CFO. So Glenn Ibbott has signed yesterday and approved by the board. He came in as our interim CFO. I think had retired from Aurora. It turns out wasn't ready to retire yet. Knew of us. We're local to Vancouver, where he is. He's extremely experienced. I'm thrilled to get such great talent into our business. He's seen the scale. He's seen all the things that we're going through. And all of that, he's just a good person and hard worker and honest and straightforward and an absolute values fit for us. So I'm absolutely thrilled to welcome him to the team.
That's fantastic. A great highlight. I was going to ask what made you know that it's the right fit? And it sounds like for all those reasons, both kind of personally and also having that background, that history, that experience. I think it is interesting in terms of what has attracted people into the cannabis industry. It either is people who are very, soaked in cannabis and in that whole world, or it is kind of pulling people from, different areas and trying to, they've had an interest and see an interest in solving an interesting problem, building something from the beginning in cannabis and kind of bring it forward. So it's interesting to see kind of, the different backgrounds that come into play. But again, seems like a great fit. So excited for him to get going. We should have him on at some point. It would be great to kind of get his.
Yeah, he's great. He's great. And, I think you have to remember 5 years ago, you couldn't hire somebody with cannabis experience.
That's true.
And so all of a sudden, what we're finding is we're putting up, we're growing as a business. And right now in Canada, the economy, unemployment's just under 7%. So there aren't as many opportunities. And we're one of the growing businesses and one of the growing industries. And so to be able to have talent out there that have worked in the industry is fantastic. And for us to attract someone like Glenn is wonderful. He's really adding value. We're seeing that all over the business, that we can attract some great people. And we're in that flywheel. There's a number of books that talk about it. As businesses are in growth modes, there's certain moments of flywheels where you're getting better and better and everybody's running faster, but running together with really clear vision of where you're going. And liking the people you work with.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a huge difference, obviously. Okay, well, that's fantastic. In terms of your results and posting them, again, very positive numbers, which is great to see. A lot of growth, a lot of sort of starting to harvest a lot of the work that you guys have done over past quarters, over past years. How different is this versus kind of what other players in the Canadian side of things have been able to put up? How different is it ultimately?
So look, there's a pack of five to seven companies that I would say are pulling away in terms of their opportunity to win in the Canadian market. And we're seeing that more consistently in the results. One area that Rubicon needs to improve is our gross margin. And we're very focused on that. And we're looking to improve that and target higher margins, more in the mid 40s. We've got some work to do there. We're seeing that out of some of those companies in that sort of 5 to 7 companies. They all have their different bent and a different specialty. What we're also seeing is that group of companies. I was at the Planet Microcap Showcase in Toronto mid-October, and I sat through a couple of presentations where they were talking about, on average, the growth companies that are, a growth company growing over 20% a year on the top line, trading 10 to 12 times next year's adjusted EBITDA. The cannabis industry is trading 5 to call it 8 times, 7 times last year's adjusted EBITDA. So we've got a discount, and it's a big stigma discount. I think as more and more companies deliver and execute and show that consistency, we're gonna see that gap and that delta change, which is exciting.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. All right, awesome. Well, then in sort of digging into some of the more highlights and things that you talked about, you mentioned obviously the new facility coming into play. I think great to be able to turn that on. I don't want to get too ahead of my skis, but are you also looking for, further expansion? What's sort of the general look ahead, for growth like that?
So number one, deliver Cascadia as a priority to demonstrate that we can execute in a second facility. That's critical to me, critical to our team, and we are putting the appropriate focus and time into that. It is the single largest short-term growth driver that we have. We have a series of other projects that will increase growth margin, and it's called our Sweat the Assets program, and you're going to hear more about it as we go through 2026. And we believe that's where we can improve gross margins and really drive leverage on the bottom line, which is exciting because we have two fantastic assets with an indoor and a hybrid greenhouse facility within an hour and a half from each other. I mean, that's just gold. So thrilled about that. Beyond, we have ambitions. I'm not going to tell you everything we're going to do, but I am going to say, look, internationally, we've just announced that we were now delivered to 3 countries. We had a branded drop for the first time into Australia with single estate. We really want to see, it's a small drop. We want to see the product quality results. We want to see how consumers react, pricing effects, all that kind of stuff. And from us, we need more volume from Cascadia to be able to launch into internationals. But that's in the plan for 2026, and we tend to want to under promise and over deliver, I would say, is a consistent message. So I'm not going to tell you exactly what we're going to do until right before we're going to do it and we've got it locked and loaded, and then I can deliver on it.
Sure.
Which I think is a good way to go in cannabis after the heavy promotion that a number of companies have done. Sure. That being said, there's one market in Canada we're not doing as well as we should be, which I think is Quebec. We have more work to do there. I think there's big opportunities in the medical channel in Canada, and there's big opportunities even with our existing brand 1964 to have more volume put through it. Just the demand is there, and we're not meeting it at this stage.
That's fair. Ultimately, though, I think you're keeping that consistent process of trying to get things up and running the right way, and having that established, I guess, quality ultimately and repeatability that is important. But I think as you keep doing this, or would keep doing this potentially, I think you get that process tighter and tighter and tighter and faster and more efficient. So I think that's very solid. You mentioned Quebec. I would love to just check in there just because I feel like the regulations there are so strange and different than other parts of Canada. Is that still the main kind of thing to overcome, or is it something else out of curiosity?
Look, Quebec is a fantastic and wonderful market. It's the second largest market in Canada, and they want to be supporting Quebec producers. It's all controlled by the province, and they have around 100 stores. A market that large probably should have 300 or 400 stores. So the black market, I think, is still thriving there. There's a lot, but this is the political will is really around reducing organized crime and public health, which is absolutely reasonable and fair. But I think, unless you're in Quebec, I think it's harder to be winning in Quebec and physically located there. So I think at some stage we'll have to make a decision whether that's something we want to do or not. Today we've got so much demand elsewhere, but I grew up spending a lot of time in Quebec, and I have a great love for the province. So trying to encourage my daughter to go to university there so I get there more because I love it so much. There's always been a natural love between British Columbia and Quebec. It's just the way it is. So, would love to see us do better there.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. I mean, I think trying to improve in whatever market you're in, but yeah, it is a question versus if you're deepening in markets that you're already in Canada that are doing well, or like you're saying, internationally, moving internationally and trying to really tap into those markets in interesting ways. So, I mean, I'm sure you're making those calculations. I'm sure you're doing the analysis on your end, so I'm sure it's good. But yeah, would love to see that, I think, across the board.
Yeah, Mac, I have to say, we're those people who, we're looking at all of our gross margin products. And as I talked about Sweat the Assets, we do economics 101 analysis, which is evaluate opportunity, complexity, time, cost. It all gets mapped on a list. Then we look at highest and best use of resources, timing, all the rest of that, versus just going from the anecdote and the gut. And it should provide the best possible decision making, but then some of the calculus are difficult in terms of supplier risk or what's the different dynamics in consumer taste and all that. So there's a lot happening, and our industry does change sort of every 6 months. You're looking at a new dynamic. Sometimes it's every 3 months.
Yeah. It feels like it's moving faster and faster. That makes me curious and want to ask, sort of, in terms of being able to do that analysis and crunch the numbers and crunch the data. I feel like there has been such a push across a lot of industries to use new tools like AI, or kind of use those things to kind of, enhance ultimately your ability to do that analysis. Are you guys kind of pulling into those tools? Are you sticking to kind of the basics? What's sort of I'm just curious.
So look, I think you can overcomplicate a ton of things.
Sure.
I'm a big proponent for AI. I think I've already found it in my work. I've got Copilot and I'm using it to save a ton of time, right? It's just fantastic. But there are some things where it's actually, sometimes it takes longer to train and get everybody there. When this is pretty economics 101, you're just going to put the same inputs into the AI that is going to give you on the output to make the analysis. I think where it's going to get interesting is in the next 5-10 years around plant health and analysis and strains and data and managing store, like inventory in different stores and all that kind of stuff. I think that's where we're going to go, and I'm absolutely here for it, because we want to use our people's brains and their skills to their best capacity rather than things that can be automated. I don't think it necessarily reduces your headcount. I think it allows you to use people differently.
Yeah, I think that's very well said. Okay, just curious, just because I think that's been such a conversation across so many industries right now, and just curious how it kind of factors into the Canadian side of things, or the cannabis side of things. All right, well, fantastic. In terms of, you mentioned the international thing, would love to dig a little bit more in depth to that. So, in terms of the exports, what are we looking at? And then you mentioned the drop in Australia. Would love to hear just a little bit more about that.
Cool. So look, international markets have gone through a roller coaster in the last 12 months in particular. Last year at this time, everybody's hair was on fire because everybody wanted to buy weed at the highest possible price. And so everybody said, we're not going to sell in Canada. We're going to sell everything internationally, and we're going to make so much money, and this is never going to end. Problem is, you're not building a channel. You're selling lots, like you're traders at that stage. And that can be, the going can be good, but it doesn't always last. And we're going to see globalization in the international markets, with Thailand and Colombia already beginning to come online. There'll be competition from other markets. South Africa is growing as well. And so we have to expect that. So when you're banking on that, you need to, as a business, put your head above the parapet, look around, look 5 years in the future, and understand what's the channel, how's this going to play out, and where are we going to win? Where are we going to win as Rubicon is staying in premium. So our vision is to be the most trusted premium house of cannabis brands. The word premium, trust, and brand are all really important in there. So we're not looking to sell drops unless they're going into brand. For us, so for the last year, we saw prices go up a lot until probably March. And then we started to hear stories in the spring of people not getting paid, product not meeting spec, even though maybe somebody was then taking it, they couldn't prove the destruction, wasn't coming back, they weren't getting paid. Just a lot of really bad behavior. And then the Portugal shut down, which meant that a whole bunch of people lost their inventory and didn't get paid for it. And so there's a lot of bad debts out there. And so then back in August, Germany's pricing dropped dramatically, really with more supply. And people said, well, that wouldn't happen because the pharmacists take a percentage or take a fee, but if they're moving more volume, it's the same, right? So they can drop price to sell more product. And then you go to the next thing that happened is Germany all of a sudden had maxed their import quotas, and everybody panicked about that. All of these things are just normal in the case of a new industry starting online with regulation changes. So what you want to be looking at, in our view, is establishing a channel and a brand that is consistent, that you can fulfill, that people will come back to time and time again. So for Rubicon, what does that mean? 2026, there'll be more, but we need the incremental biomass to come from our Cascadia facility. And I think probably about half of it, now this is early estimates, would go into the international market at higher margin than we could get in Canada. And, but we believe you need a strong domestic business in order to do that.
Yeah. And strong, consistent product and having that brand built. Yeah. I think that all makes sense. Yeah. It does make sense that as things kind of mature, that's where the trends go, things stabilize, prices come down to a more normal element. But I think staying in that channel, staying in that conversation, but being able to have your products be there and not get filtered out, I think is the key element over time. And it'll be interesting to see. I don't know what 2026 has to hold, but I think with cannabis becoming such a global story, if new markets even open up and being able to kind of get in there as well will be super interesting to see. So we'll have to wait and see.
Well, they will. Like, I think this is a when, not an if. I mean, attitudes have changed so much.
Yeah.
Just in Canada, we're 7 years into legalization, 8 years into legalization.
Rubbing it in.
And people, the stigma, certainly on the West Coast, the stigma was lower anyways. It is so much lower. It is so much more normalized. People aren't doing that thing where they're comparing cannabis to fentanyl anymore. They're like, oh, these are two completely different things. One does not lead to the next. I was back in the UK a couple of years ago. That was the same. They had it. Everybody was asking me about it. There was a curiosity where 5 years before that, they'd been saying, how could you do this to your career? You are crazy. So they're going to, markets around the world are going to go through the same journeys. And in the same way that at the beginning, a lot of the companies out of Canada were selling the products that they couldn't really sell in Canada. The quality that wasn't there was going internationally. And that was certainly the first few years. But the consumer internationally is also learning and they're moving up the curve. And these markets are going to look to have more differentiated product. There's going to be a range of products, good, better, best, right? Any classic branding scenario. And people that 6 months ago told me that, this market's never going to want premium have called in the last month and said, we'd love to buy all your wholesale. We need a premium strategy. Nice. So differentiation is important. This is what's going to happen. And there's a fascinating dynamic happening, Mac, which is there's all this production coming online, not coming back online. So there's net new production in Canada, but also internationally. But it's not, we've been looking around to try and find where the premium is, and there's not net new premium for production. There's probably small amounts that I'm not accounting for, but it's really not out there, which means what we do and our facility is getting more and more rare. And I have a little piece of information that I can drop, which is the first part of the Canadian Kind Awards, which are voted on by bud tenders, so not paid awards, etc., were last night. And the thing that I was like, we really want to be leading on premium flower. We want to have the best genetics house in the world, not just in Canada. Like we're in quietly for the last 3 years, we've been working on it. We joke that it's Fight Club because we don't talk about Fight Club, but we are proud of our genetics, and you can see it in market what's coming. And I really, really wanted to win Flower of the Year. I mean, I'm not even. They say courage is saying the thing that you want that you might not get. I was internally saying, God, I really want to win that because I love this product so much. So it was Simply Bare Organics Pink Drip, and it not only won Flower of the Year, but it also won the write-in bud tender. What is your favorite product of the year? Which tells me that the hard work we're doing to build not only consistency and trust, but also beautiful, unique cultivars to lead on genetics is out there. And I want to give absolute credit to our team and to also the breeders that's originated these because they deserve it. It's fantastic, the work they've done.
Yeah, it's fantastic to see that recognition. I think over time, also building that track record, basically of having those wins, super important. And I imagine just from a team growing perspective, to have that under your belt and feel very proud about what you're doing and having that be recognized has to be kind of energizing as well for kind of the broader team and the growers as well. So yeah. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's great. Do you get like a trophy award, a physical award? Do you?
Yeah, these big glass blocks that have the awards on them, and I'm going to talk about it at our company meeting in about 2 hours and announce it to the team. So if anybody's watching, they're hearing it live now. But we're winning the hearts and minds of bud tenders. In Canada, everything is over the counter. And they're our influencer. If you think about like a social media influencer, our influencer is the bud tender. They speak to almost every customer that comes in. Yep. And we really care about them. They're critical. Our sales team is magic. They're absolutely critical to this. We're those passionate BC weed people, as I said at the beginning. And I believe that there is room in this industry for very good people with high integrity to deliver wonderful products that Canada and BC can be proud of. And we're going to do it and we're going to do the work time and time again to deliver it. And I don't think 20 years ago, if you met me, or when I was doing my undergraduate business degree, people would have thought that I'd be touting cannabis quite so much. But I am so proud of the 250 employees we now have, and where I think we're going to go with the growth of this new facility, the uptick on the revenue line, the profitability that's going to bring, but also the opportunities we're creating for people.
Yeah,
So
I think a lot to look forward to, a lot of good being done. Yeah, I think it's fantastic across the board, which is fantastic. I'm seeing some questions come in, which I do want to get a question on, but I did also, just while we were talking international, want to get a quick, I don't know if you have a quick take on what's going on our side of the border in the US in terms of what market could come to be, if you're seeing anything from all this hemp, loophole cleanup. Any thoughts in terms of what it might mean for eventually being in the US?
yeah, look, I think it's fascinating because the Canadian public health view is so different on the intoxicating products. Like I just don't think that the hemp derived cannabinoids would have been allowed on shelf. It just never would have gotten there. And with the national grocery chains and the way that our distribution works, I think it would have been shut down reasonably quickly. Also because we are federally legal for cannabis, that already describes it. So I've been fascinated watching that debate happen because I was actually very worried about the public health side of it with young people consuming and getting access to it. There's a statistically significant number of people that if they consume a large amount when they're teenagers and their brain's developing, have real problems. And I think that is a public health crisis waiting to happen. So yeah, I'm a big believer in weed and I think people should enjoy it and love it. But I do think there's an age at which that should start. So I think that any intoxicating cannabinoid should be regulated. But then from how you do it, as long as the age gating is there, then it's up to let the markets run.
Yep. No, I think that totally makes sense. And again, I think the hope and the view is that this is kind of on that step towards getting that age gating really, really tightened up, making sure it addresses the, regulation element of things. So it is safe, controlled, tested, all those things. So we'll have to wait and see, but definitely interesting things on this side of the board.
Fascinating. It's been fascinating to watch.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Noah's got a great question, which is what defines premium as a consumer? What should we be looking for? Or is it ultimately about individual taste / price? Great question.
It is a great question. We get asked that question a lot. So premium is not just, in Canada, one of the things that we had a problem with was inflated THC, where the consumer was walking in and the only thing that they could see was to differentiate a product was strain name and THC. So a lot of consumers walk in and say, I want highest THC, lowest price. A connoisseur would tell you, I'm looking for strain, I'm looking for the terpene profile, I'm looking for effect and experience. So we need to tell that story, and we need to find ways that we can tell that story within the regulation. So for us, it's about strain, it's about flavor, aroma, and experience, and terpenes are a very big part of that. So as I said earlier, hitting 5.8% terpenes, I sort of fell off my chair. Because it was so unusual to hear a percentage like that. So we think the effect is what gets really exciting. And so also being new and novel and different and an interesting cross is part of premium, not just high THC. And high THC definitely doesn't make something premium.
Yeah, I think it feels, I hate the parallels sometimes to alcohol, but I think sometimes there are very valid, parallels around that. It feels like, back in prohibition in the US side of things, you might be looking for the most bang for your buck with like grain alcohol where you're really wincing through it, but you feel like you're getting the effects. But as things mature, you are moving into, nice wines versus tequilas versus, I think it is that sort of
single malt scotch versus, why is a single malt scotch better than a cheap blended whiskey? That's the same experience that you're getting in cannabis. And I think we have to remember that there are cannabis connoisseurs, and there's a lot of them. We find, our Simply Bare Organic brand is really looking to always have, every quarter it's got 2 new drops coming into it, and then they're available, and then they're gone. And part of that is also demonstrating our genetics library and showing people that what cannabis can be and to go and try a beautiful strain. But our 1964 brand is around looking at that legacy consumer who smokes a lot of weed, what's great. They know what premium is. They expect it to be premium. And they want it to be consistent every time and great value for money.
Yeah.
And so that's a really important person to be targeting as well, and satisfying. They're a hard person to satisfy.
That's true. I imagine, though, there are more and more people who are like that. I know there are kind of the OGs who, pre-legalization, really cared about cannabis and cared about the plant and cared about the profile and all those things. But I feel like as it's been around longer and longer, I think people's tastes who might be new to cannabis relatively are maturing as well over a period of, like you're saying, 8 years is a long time to kind of really refine your own taste and your own preferences. And so I imagine that's a growing group ultimately that kind of ties into the premium element.
I think it's fascinating because there's a piece there where back in the day you would have somebody, the fancy guys would come to you with a briefcase, and they didn't say this is COA tested at 28 versus 25 versus 24%. They would talk about the effect and what are you looking for, and that curation of what you were looking for. We want people to, we're looking to educate on that, so that people can understand, is this the right strain for me? Often a lot of people, really high THC brings out a lot of anxiety and things like that, but they can get an amazing effect. Our Creek Congo, we did a limited drop of just here in British Columbia because we had so much asked for it. It was our first strain we ever grew. It came in around 20%, but reasonably high terps, and people said it knocked them out as much as 28%. Like, it's such a beautiful strain, and it's about what the mix of it is in there. So the genetic is such a huge part of premium. And how do you grow it? Growing it well, curing it properly. A lot of people grow something really well, and then they put it in underneath basically a dryer for 18 hours or 25 hours to dry it. I mean, it's like oregano. That's not beautiful cured weed.
Yeah, I think that's the important part of premium, I imagine, from a production perspective, is every part of the process needs to be spot on. It cannot, lapse in one area. So that's great. All right, I know there's one more thing I definitely want to touch on, but I'm seeing a question from Renato, which I'm not sure you can answer this, but any chance you talked with Micah at Leaf or someone else down south, gummies for you later? How much are you having conversations with?
I don't know Micah from Leaf, but thank you for the referral. We get a lot of inbounds from the United States. A number of them are, how do you do what you do, and how can we do it here? And can you teach us how to grow? And we're like, no, we're going to just keep that. That's not something we give away. And our team is busy standing up our next facility. But look, I'm very curious about the US, but it's been a challenging market to be in. And I think there's other places to go that are open to us today. And we still have a lot of growth left in the Canadian market. 20 to 40% of people are still buying in the legacy market, and something like in that range say they both buy in both markets, and it skews premium. So if you look forward 10 years, are people still going to be like, when was the last time you bought legacy alcohol? Like, that doesn't happen. So in 10 years, maybe it's 10, 15% of the market. There's a lot of that growth. The premium consumer tends to skew into the legacy market because of strain choice and selection, and they were disappointed originally from the legal market. We're working very hard to show them that there's a path in the legal market, and there's products they can trust that they can consume time and time again. So I still think there's tons of growth in Canada.
Yeah, I think we've seen the stats of all the transition from the illicit market to the legal market, and I'm imagining that only continues. Also, yes, no free advice around. I think that is a secret sauce that they get to hold on to as they build out.
No, I would say that the secret thing I would say is that processing is as important as your cultivation. And so when you harvest, and how you dry and how you cure and all of that, like, we've had opportunities to make more sales. We could have pulled sales out earlier, but we wait and we cure our product properly. So I've cracked open jars of Simply Bare that were 2 years old, and the product still was fantastic. So it's about, we don't put Bevitas in our packaging, anything like that. It's about beautiful premium quality weed consistently, and that's about the process.
That's fair. I feel like that is great. That is useful advice, but I feel like the ultimate takeaway is do everything well and put a lot of care and time and effort into each step of the process and get it correct. But yeah,
and don't compromise on it. Especially if you're building a brand. Look, you cannot compromise on quality, because one bad lot can ruin your entire brand reputation.
That is true. Yeah. All right. That's important. All right. Well, then final thing that I kind of wanted to touch on, just in terms of, the landscape, how things are moving. I know there's something interesting, I think you had mentioned earlier, on sort of the Canadian budget, something changing earlier in November. Wanted to kind of check in on what that was, what that means impacts wise, get a sense there.
Yeah, look, the Canadian federal budget came out November 4th. There was one mention of cannabis, Unfortunately, we were hoping for more. And it was a reduction in the amount that veterans were being reimbursed for their medical cannabis. So that will have a big impact on the large medical companies that service veterans. I won't speak to what the impact is. I'm sure those companies will get that question a lot. What does that mean? It went from about $8.50 a gram to $6. And if I have that wrong, somebody can correct me. And right now we're excise taxed in the recreational market on 10%, even if the price is $3 or $10, even if the price is $3. So it's basically the government saying, $10 is too expensive. $8.50 is too expensive. It should be $6. So actually provides us with a good argument on excise to go back and try and get excise reform. So I'm buoyed by that. But we were promised one national excise stamp to put on every package has to have that, and we didn't get it. But look, we have a current prime minister who's very focused on nation building projects and projects that increase Canada's GDP. And this industry is growing, and in my view, and I think in the industry's view, a very clear opportunity for a great position globally, given the expertise we've developed over the last number of years. And so we're going to continue to beat the drum on that. It's there's a long way to go, and there's a lot yet to learn.
Yes, that is true. I will say that it feels a little, I mean, I think it's great that it's turned into an opportunity. It does feel a little bit tough that happens. I think, a handful of days ahead of Memorial Day, or not Memorial Day, Remembrance Day or Veterans Day. But I think being able to give access, I think still to veterans for cannabis, just because we've had that medical element, is so important. Yeah, interesting. All right, let me see through questions. Also, great point. People who want quality.
Yeah. You know what? They do care about price. And one of the things that I would say on that comment is, we're seeing some difficult economic times for a lot of people out there. So we want to make sure in our portfolio, and we constantly are looking at this, that we have something priced at every price point. So somebody who walks in with $10 or $20 only in their wallet can walk out with one of our premium products. And so that's actually about how you're segmenting and categorizing and what categories you're in, so they can have that fabulous experience, because we want people that have taken their hard-earned dollars to have a great experience with our products.
Yeah. All right. Well said. Perfect. All right. Well, then I think my final question is, I normally ask you, what you've liked lately, what's been in the product lineup. I feel like Blue Dream has been in the mix for a while, but I saw recently you've changed. There's a new one out in the mix.
My personal recent favorite is our pink drip. That's just one flower of the year. I remember my first experience of having it, which every great weed experience I've had, I remember that first experience. And it was definitely my flower of the summer. I'm not a heavy smoker. I only smoke sort of a few times a month. I tend to prefer edibles, and that's just life and family and all that kind of stuff. But it is such a beautiful product. And I actually, I couldn't be more proud to have one with that product, because I just think it's it's such a great product. And I'm really proud of what we've done there. So it's great. And somebody told me to make sure that I said on this podcast, so I'm going to say it, that Rubicon today our share price is about where it was 9 months ago. And we have de-risked considerably our business as well. We now have our Cascadia facility licensed and ready to go. And I was told, this person was texting me saying, I can't believe the pricing that you can get. Sorry, I banged my hand on the I can't believe the price that your company is, because this is just an absolute steal for where you guys are sitting. And I completely agree. But I want you all to know we're working very hard for our shareholders out there and for our people.
That's fantastic. Well, again, very excited. I feel like it's a great present and a very interesting, exciting future. So very excited to have you on again, kind of keep talking through the story and where things are landing. I think great insight into, Canada, the international market, and of course, Rubicon, what you're specifically doing in premium. I think it's great to hear about. So appreciate you taking the time. Excited for you get to have your next meeting and tell your team about your win. I think that's very exciting. Yeah. I think that's just about it. But thanks so much, Margaret. Really, really appreciate it. Any final thoughts?
Well, I mean, my final thought is not even about Rubicon, but I'm just to say that I think there's going to be some major strides moving forward in the U.S. with hemp-derived cannabinoids. The recent announcement, I think rescheduling is going to come before the midterms. And I think it's going to be a fabulous next 2-3 years for cannabis companies and the people that have put in the hard yards in in the downs. We've been through the downs. And if you've been through the downs, boy, do we know how to make hay when the sun shines?
I love that. All right, fantastic. Thank you so much. Appreciate the time. Everyone, thanks for joining. Hope this was helpful, insightful. Really appreciate the questions and comments as well. So thanks, everyone. Really appreciate it. And we'll catch you next time. Thanks so much again.
Before investing, carefully consider the investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses found in the prospectus, available at AdvisorShares.com.